started shouting aggressively on a crowded subway, alarming everyone around. For the passengers on an F train in New York City, this wasn't a hypothetical. It was the reality they faced on May 1st, 2023. What followed was a tragic and polarizing incident that has left the city and the entire nation debating issues of self-defense, mental health, and public safety. Today, we're diving into the story of Daniel Penny, a former Marine, and Jordan Neely, a young homeless man, whose encounter on that subway train ended in an unexpected and devastating death. Penny now faces manslaughter charges, with public opinion torn on whether his actions were necessary or went too far. This case is more than just a trial. It's a story of complex choices, and today, we're here to explore the details of those crucial moments and what led up to them. In-depth look at Jordan Neely's background. Jordan Neely's story is, unfortunately, emblematic of the harsh realities faced by many people struggling with untreated mental illness and homelessness. Born and raised in New York City, Neely's early life seemed promising, marked by his talent for dance. He became known locally for his skill as a Michael Jackson impersonator, drawing attention from tourists and locals alike. His performances were captivating. Neely had studied the king of pop's moves to near perfection, but behind this charismatic persona was a life scarred by trauma and suffering, beginning with a tragedy that would change his life forever. When Neely was 14, his mother, Christy Neely, was brutally murdered. Christy's death had a profound impact on Jordan's mental health. After her body was found in a suitcase on a Bronx highway, it was discovered that her boyfriend had been responsible for her death. This devastating event marked a sharp turning point for Neely, who would later experience both schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, conditions that made life increasingly difficult for him. His mother's violent death, without the support system needed to help him cope, created a void in his life that no amount of street performing could fill. As he entered adulthood, his mental health challenges grew more severe. Neely's symptoms became pronounced, causing him to act unpredictably in public spaces, often leading to confrontations. He fell through the cracks of New York City's mental health and homelessness support systems, spending years cycling in and out of shelters, hospitals, and even jails for minor offenses tied to his mental health condition. For many individuals like Neely, the intersection of homelessness and mental illness can make it nearly impossible to achieve stability, and without consistent care, his condition worsened over time. Neely's erratic behavior and growing distress weren't unnoticed. His family members have reported that they tried to help him but struggled to keep him engaged in treatment, and resources for continuous mental health care were limited. The city's social safety nets, though intended to support people like Neely, often fell short in providing him the long-term treatment he needed. On the subway, Neely's presence became more frequent, and while some passengers were familiar with his performances, others encountered him on days when he was visibly agitated or acting out, potentially perceiving him as a threat. By the time of his encounter with Daniel Penny, Neely had been reported to have lost a significant amount of weight, looked unwell, and was seen as a vulnerable person in need of help. His hunger, his pleas for food, and his escalating agitation on that subway car all pointed to a man in desperate need of support. For many, he symbolized the failure of New York City's systems to adequately support those battling mental illness in an environment that offers little room for vulnerability. Neely's story is, in many ways, a reflection of how society often fails to address the root causes of mental health struggles and homelessness. His death has raised questions about what more could have been done to intervene and provide him with the care he needed before that tragic day. Join our journey into the complex world of true crime by subscribing to the channel. With your help, we can continue to shine a light on important stories and engage in meaningful discussions. Daniel Penny, a Marine's response. Daniel Penny was 24 years old, a former Marine who'd served in the U.S. military. Raised in West Islip, New York, Penny had joined the Marine Corps after high school, driven by a desire to serve. By all accounts, Penny had led a fairly ordinary life after returning to civilian life, blending back into his hometown and even working toward a stable career path. But on May 1, 2023, Penny found himself in an extraordinary situation. He was one of the many passengers on the F train that day, seemingly unaware of what was about to unfold. When Neely began shouting and acting erratically, it's reported that he declared he was hungry, thirsty, and didn't care if he went to jail. Witnesses would later recount how unsettling the experience was. Some feared for their safety, while others felt sympathy, aware of Neely's precarious state. But for Penny, the line between compassion and defense blurred as he took action to restrain Neely. The fatal chokehold. In a moment that happened faster than anyone could react, Penny moved behind Neely and applied a chokehold to restrain him. This wasn't just a brief hold, though. Penny maintained the chokehold for approximately 6 minutes, a duration that proved fatal. Passengers watched as the situation grew increasingly tense, some recording the encounter on their phones, unsure of what they were witnessing. In these 6 minutes, Penny held Neely until he eventually stopped moving. By the time emergency responders arrived, it was too late. Neely had died due to compression on his neck. The medical examiner ruled the death a homicide, but Penny, by that point, had already left the scene. It wouldn't be until later, after public outrage grew and videos of the incident circulated, that Penny was identified and subsequently charged with second-degree manslaughter. The legal battle begins: self-defense or excessive force. The charges against Daniel Penny set off a chain reaction of debate and controversy. His defense argued that Penny had acted to protect himself and other passengers from what he perceived as a potential threat. Penny, they claimed, had not intended to kill Neely, but rather to neutralize a perceived danger. They pointed to Penny's military training and argued that he'd acted as anyone might when faced with an unpredictable and frightening situation. From their perspective, Penny's response was rooted in self-defense, with no intent to harm Neely fatally. But the prosecution painted a different picture, arguing that Penny's use of force was excessive and far beyond what was necessary. Holding Neely in a chokehold for 6 minutes, they claimed, indicated a recklessness that ultimately led to Neely's death. They pointed to the fact that a trained Marine like Penny should have known the risks of using such a maneuver, especially for such a prolonged time. Public reaction and controversy. The case quickly became more than just a legal proceeding. Videos of the incident spread online, leading to a media firestorm and widespread public reaction. Advocates for homeless rights and mental health support argued that the system had failed Neely long before he ever stepped on that train. They pointed to the many times he'd been in and out of shelters, his untreated mental illness, and his lack of consistent support as evidence that the city hadn't done enough to help him. Others, however, viewed Penny as a man who stepped up in a moment of crisis, acting in defense of others. For them, the question was one of intent. Did Penny genuinely believe that he was preventing harm? And if so, should he be held responsible for an outcome he didn't intend? The societal divide, safety versus compassion. This case struck a nerve because it reflected a deeper societal issue. The complex line between safety and compassion, between protecting oneself and caring for those in need. On one hand, the passengers were scared. Neely's unpredictable behavior left many feeling vulnerable, highlighting the lack of security that some feel on public transportation. On the other hand, many argue that New York City's infrastructure for addressing mental health and homelessness is fractured, leading to tragic incidents like this. This case has polarized people across the political spectrum. Some view it as a stark reminder of the consequences of ignoring the needs of the homeless and mentally ill. Others see it as a case where a concerned citizen attempted to protect himself and those around him from perceived danger, even if the outcome was unintended. Penny's defense and the importance of intent. As Penny's trial began, his defense made clear that they would argue not only self-defense, but also the question of intent. They emphasized that Penny, a former Marine, reacted instinctively in a high-stress moment. But the prosecution pushes back, stating that Penny's training should have also made him aware of the risks involved in such an action. They argue that his military experience made it more, not less, likely that he understood the potential consequences of a prolonged chokehold. The trial has highlighted the fine line between self-defense and excessive force. Did Penny truly understand what he was doing, or did he lose control in a moment of fear and panic? Public impact and the wider debate. The trial isn't just about Daniel Penny and Jordan Neely. It's also about society's values and how we approach complex social issues. It's a case that has spotlighted New York City's struggles to support those dealing with mental health issues and homelessness. It's also sparked questions about how society values different lives and what we deem as necessary force in situations that feel unsafe. With public demonstrations, ongoing debates, and intense media scrutiny, this case has transcended the courtroom and become a symbol of much larger issues. The trial is expected to last 6 weeks, with witness testimonies, video evidence, and arguments from both sides aiming to sway the jury on whether Penny's actions were justifiable or criminal. If you want to be part of a community that seeks to understand the nuances of each case, subscribe today. Together, we can explore the many layers of the stories that fascinate and inform us. Closing thoughts. As we reflect on the Daniel Penny case, it becomes clear that it's not just about a single tragic encounter on a subway train. It's a microcosm of larger societal issues that demand our attention. This case forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about public safety, mental health, and our collective responsibility toward one another. First and foremost, it highlights the urgent need for a more compassionate and effective approach to mental health care and homelessness. Jordan Neely's struggles were not isolated incidents. They represent a growing crisis in many urban areas where individuals suffering from mental health issues are often left without adequate support. The circumstances surrounding Neely's life, his untreated mental health conditions, and the systemic failures that left him vulnerable, remind us that the tragedy didn't begin and end with the chokehold. Rather, it reflects a broader societal failure to address the needs of our most vulnerable citizens. Additionally, the case challenges us to reconsider our instinctive reactions to perceived threats. In moments of fear, how do we balance self-defense with empathy? Daniel Penny, driven by a desire to protect himself and others, made a split-second decision that had catastrophic consequences. This raises critical questions about the nature of fear and the human instinct to respond aggressively when confronted with uncertainty. How do we cultivate environments where individuals feel safe without resorting to violence? The public discourse surrounding this trial has been deeply polarized, with opinions often split along political and social lines. Some see Penny as a vigilante hero standing up against an alarming threat, while others view him as a perpetrator of unnecessary violence. This division reflects a fundamental societal tension. How do we protect ourselves while also caring for those who are struggling? Moreover, this case serves as a poignant reminder of the complexities of justice in America. It underscores the ongoing debates about race, privilege, and how the legal system responds to different individuals based on their backgrounds. Public perception of this case will likely evolve as it unfolds in the courtroom, shaping narratives that resonate far beyond New York City. As the trial progresses, it's essential for us to engage thoughtfully with these themes. We must ask ourselves, what does justice look like in a situation where both parties have suffered? How do we ensure that our public spaces are safe for everyone, including those who may be experiencing crises? Ultimately, the story of Daniel Penny and Jordan Neely is one that invites us to examine our own values and the societal structures we uphold. It urges us to envision a future where compassion can coexist with safety and where systems are in place to support those who need it most. As we await the outcome of the trial, let's carry forward the lessons learned from this tragic event, striving for a more inclusive and understanding society. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.